Well, good morning. Before I became a consultant, in my misspent youth, and also I have to admit a fair amount of my misspent middle age, I was a finance director of 6 companies for periods ranging from 5 years down to 10 days. Range of different companies, some of them startups, some of them turnarounds, some of them highly innovative, spending a quarter of their revenues on product development, others of them in areas where the technology hadn't changed for 25 years. Some of them in what you might consider to be creative industries, others of them not at all in that sphere. And reflecting on that experience, my conclusion is, and this might seem a rather strange one at a conference about creativity where you have already heard, we'll hear more about how to be more creative. But it seemed to me, if you do want to be more creative and innovative, which I think you do need to be, the way to do it is not by working on being more creative or more innovative. It's actually something quite different. And to illustrate that, let's start with a case study or a story, if you want. The story of Intel, who very probably made the chip that's inside your PC. Now, Intel started its life as a memory company, and very, very successful there in its early years. By the mid-1980s, though, its memory business was in great difficulties because the Japanese had entered that market and they were pretty comprehensively killing Intel. And it was very, very clear that if Intel couldn't do the obvious thing, get out of the memory business, throw all its resources into its then quite new but clearly promising microprocessor business, then they were finished. Simple as that. But it proved immensely, agonisingly hard to do. Andy Grove, the then president, talks about a year of aimless wandering in the valley of death, trying to make this very simple decision. And he talks about conversations he had. He went to visit the head of one of the memory units, and he came out of that meeting and said, hang on, what have I done? I've just agreed with this guy that he can continue with these expensive research projects he's got on the go. I'm not letting him start any new ones, but he can continue the ones he's got to produce products which I've just said we're not going to be selling. All sorts of very strange arguments came up as to why Intel had at all costs to stay in the memory business. There was the technology driver argument. You know, historically we've always developed our new technologies, our new manufacturing processes in the memory business. And then we've transferred them to microprocessors, so we have to continue doing that. Or there was the full product line argument. We have to offer memories and processors, otherwise our customers, the PC manufacturers, won't be interested if we can only offer microprocessors. Now, when you think about both of those, they're really quite flaky, aren't they? Well, you know, historically we always developed our technology in memory because that's where the company started. Surely if it becomes financially impossible to develop memories, it should not be beyond our collective ingenuity to find some way of developing microprocessor technology directly. And the full product range argument is even lamer. You know? We're not offering a full product range because our customers are buying power units and fans and boxes and keyboards and hard drives and floppy drives and CD drives and you name it, from a whole wide range of suppliers. And they also demonstrated they're very happy to buy large amounts of memory from these Japanese people who don't have a microprocessor to offer them. So these arguments clearly did not stack up at all, but they were being seriously adduced as a reason for not making this necessary change. And we're not even talking about the benefit of hindsight here. It was obvious at the time to anyone who wasn't working for Intel that this was what they had to do. And in fact, when they finally made the decision and they went out to their customers, told them we're not going to be selling you memories anymore, customers were completely unfazed and the typical reaction was, oh, what took you so long? Now, why was it that this very successful company, filled with enormously intelligent engineers, which at the same time was being hugely innovative in other ways because they continue to develop new and better chips in microprocessors, in memories, was having great difficulty making this really obvious but very necessary change. And I'd suggest that the reason is because they were enormously talented engineers, and they were very, very good at dealing with rational problems, issues that could be dealt with within the area of rationality. And they're not alone in that, because if you think about the basic management literature, think about Peter Drucker, for instance. If you look through the hundreds of case studies that he puts in his various books, there's nothing like this. It's all very rational, very analytical. We'll analyse the situation in this framework, we'll work out what to be done, we'll use these principles to organise how we do it, and then, wow, because we've done all this, it'll get done. Michael Porter, again, very rational, very analytical, very, very helpful within its range. I use Porter's ideas and Drucker's ideas a lot in my work, but it's clear that there's this issue of the irrational that they just can't deal with. And so here's a company, Intel, it's very creative, it's very innovative in its product range. It is completely disabled from responding to a very, very significant challenge. Hugely creative in one area, utterly, pathologically uncreative in another. And as you read Grove's book, Only the Paranoids 5, which he wrote about 8 or 10 years after the events he describes, you can get a sense of his complete bafflement, even then, about what was going on. He just could not understand, because he couldn't take that step into the irrational. And that, I think, is where we have to go. Now, it so happens my wife is a psychotherapist, so I'm quite familiar with the wilder shores of the human psyche, but we don't need to go there. It's good enough to take a step outside management thinking and go to areas like social science, social psychology, behavioural economics, which can shed a great deal of light. This is one of my tricks as a consultant. People are completely stuck with problems, and I find some apparently novel approach which has actually been lying around in the field of social psychology for 40 years, and I bring it over and it solves the problem. But there's a real issue with the irrational drag, if you like, on creativity, and that's why I say very often, if you want to be more creative, don't think about being more creative. Deal with what is preventing you using the good ideas that you already have. The Intel case, what we see there is a very, very good example of something which, if I had another 10 minutes, and I probably ought to do this because it's an academic institution, give it some sort of research respectability, I could assimilate into Daniel Kahneman's idea of System 1 and System 2 in behavioural economics, but in the interest of time, I'll just tell it to you. The problem is, we're not trying to deal with 21st century management challenges using 20th century thinking. We're trying to deal with 21st century challenges using Stone Age brains. And what we saw in the case of Intel, and what you see in a great many cases of organisations which struggle to innovate and be creative and act creatively, is this. It's a very basic heuristic rule of operating. Familiarity equals security. And it worked really well back in the Stone Age, and the people who operated this rule are the people who survived long enough to reproduce and be our ancestors. But they have bequeathed this sort of hardwired mechanism to us. And the way it works is this. Imagine you're a caveman. Empathy exercise here. You've been transplanted out of your normal environment, the savannah, into the Amazon rainforest. Everything is completely different. New sights, new sounds, new smells. How do you make sense of it? You don't have a lot of language, you don't have science to tell you what's good or bad. Here's this fruit. Is it good to eat, or will it poison me? This sound in the undergrowth, it's an animal. Could it be my lunch, or will I be its lunch? No way of dealing with this except to fall back on a basic principle. Well, if this situation is familiar to me, it means I've encountered it in the past and survived. Therefore, I can probably survive it again. If it's unfamiliar, dear me, don't know, best avoid. And this pattern has got hardwired into our brains, and it can cause us a great deal of trouble when we're trying to be innovative and creative. particularly in a situation like Intel, where the key task is not to create, but to destroy. If they were going to make it as a microprocessor business, they had to destroy their memory business. And that is the other very powerful psychological dynamic I'd like to talk about. It is, as you know, Picasso, that great creative artist, is quoted as saying, any act of creation begins with an act of destruction. So, bear in mind those 2 points. The horrible power of the familiarity equals security dynamic, and the fact it worked brilliantly in a very unchanging environment like the Stone Age does not work so well for us now at all. And the particular difficulty that creates when our initial task is actually more destructive than creative. Creativity, innovation needs some empty space to move into. In so many organisations there is no empty space. We're trying to produce new products, but our product range is already over full. We're trying to find new ways of working, but we're over full with policies and procedures and systems and standards and customs and all the rest of it. If we can't address that destructive task, then we're really going to struggle to be creative and innovative, whatever wonderful techniques we may have to deploy in that area. So, you know, I wish I could offer you a nice, neatly packaged 8-step plan for doing this, but it's a bit harder than that. I mean, as a principle, though, be prepared to engage with the irrational and realise that destruction is probably a lot more difficult than you think, even if the thing you're trying to get rid of is very clearly past its best. Just as an example of this, I spoke recently to a partner in a firm of solicitors, and he was trying to merge his firm with a bigger firm, and he was very excited about it. You know, bigger firm, bigger clients, larger fees, more exciting prospects, all the rest of it. His problem was that there was a group of his partners who were very unexcited about it, and he just couldn't understand why. And if he couldn't get them on side, then he couldn't get the necessary majority to do the deal. And he said, what should I do? And I said, well, the first thing you have to do is stop getting excited about this. You're excited about this because you're a corporate guy and you spend your time helping people build huge infrastructure projects, so you live in the future. Your colleagues were the private wealth department. They principally helped old money families hang on to what they'd inherited and pass it on, undiminished at least, to their children. So I said to him, if you can present your argument in terms of continuity, one of the things you've told me could work. You've said you need to merge because at the moment you're too small a firm to be attractive to the sort of lawyers who will become the next leader, next generation of leaders. So if you talk to your private wealth colleagues about, you know, securing the future of the firm, if you talk about continuity, if you talk about the legacy you want to lead, then you have a chance of getting them around onto your side. If you don't, then you're going to lose them altogether. And it's interesting to think when you engage with the irrational. And if on the other hand, you've gone to the books of, say, John Cotter, who's a big name in management, change management, Cotter would say, yeah, these people just no-nos. They're the people you will inevitably get who just don't like what you're doing, and they will use all sorts of horrible, sneaky ways to stop it. And, says Cotter, without any consideration of why they're no-nos, you just have to neutralise them. You know, you fire them, or you think of some special project which involves them relocating to China for 2 years. Which, if they're your partners in a professional firm, is not really feasible. But if you can engage with that irrationality and find ways to deal with it, find ways to understand what's going on, then life becomes rather more complicated, but progress does become possible. Thanks very much.
On the one hand, we're running a bit late overall, but on the other hand, you've run short on time, Alastair, for your session. So,